In the forecast, it looks like May is going to bring us that fun to Friday morning. My name is Cyndi Vos, as most of you know. I'm the CEO of the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to welcome Brad Whalen. He's one of the candidates for our upcoming election as mayor in the fall. And we started this because we thought this is a great opportunity for our members and our community to connect with the candidates and ask some questions and just get a conversation going. So we know our candidates a little bit earlier, and we're ready for those fun debate sessions. We know we want to prepare, and we want everybody to have an opportunity to talk. So I'm going to just let Brad introduce himself, and then we're going to jump into some questions back and forth. I would ask that if you do have questions, if you wouldn't mind putting them in the chat line, or you can also put your hand up. You can go to where the participants are, and you can just click on raise my hand over there. So please feel free to put comments in the chat box. We'll monitor it. And then if there's something if you really want to speak to something, of course, we welcome you the opportunity to unmute and get conversations going. So I'll let you take over for a bit, Brad.
Hi, so some of you I do know. I've met some of you before. Cyndi, I see Cyndi there. So I have met a couple of people before, and I recognize some familiar names. My name is Brad Whalen. I'm 38. I'm an entrepreneur here in the city. I've been in Lethbridge since 2014. I moved here from Nova Scotia. I have 5 boys here in the city, from 1.5 to 12, so they keep me fairly busy between that and work, and yeah, just getting to enjoy the city as much as we can. And it's a little tougher with restrictions and stuff, but yeah, I guess I kind of decided to run for mayor because I just thought that I had a good voice and I had the ability to share some great ideas and hopefully help make the city better for my family and my children and other families in the city. So
perfect, thank you. Now, you had mentioned that you are an entrepreneur, which I know that you are. So tell us a little bit more about your business background and experience, and how you think this perspective would help you as your role as the mayor.
So I started my first business when I was 12. It was called Seaside Crafts. So where I come from, I lived very close to the beach, within a 2-minute walk. So my very first business was selling little bags of sand and coal dust, because we had a lot of coal dust that washed up on our beach because we lived next to a power plant. And I started selling them when I was 12 years old at a local flea market and doing craft shows and things like that. So that was kind of my kickstart into working for myself. And it kind of grew from there. I worked with a number of organizations that taught entrepreneurs. And 16, I started my own landscaping company, which was fairly big. And eventually I ended up selling that when I went to college. So I did take a business administration diploma program, 2 years at Nova Scotia Community College. My focus was in international business more so than normal business. So we did a lot of feasibility studies and market entry plans and things like that for companies overseas during my second year, and actually did a 10-day trip to the Netherlands, where we went and presented a feasibility studies and a market entry plan for a company that actually wanted to come to Canada. So I've always had a passion for doing my own thing and trying to be successful that way. So between flea markets and trade fairs and getting into the landscaping, and I also have a background. So kind of rewind, I didn't go to business school until 2010. But after I graduated high school, I went to carpentry school and did a 2-year carpentry program. But I more focused on finished carpentry, building furniture and stuff like that, not so much home construction, although I've done some home building and working with ICF. Like I took a super foam training, and that was one of the focuses that I did back east, was dealing with ICF foundations and stuff like that. So but my passion was always, and still is, building furniture. Unfortunately, it's not a marketable enterprise for me because I'm very picky when I'm doing that. So for me to build a bedroom set for somebody, it would take me 2 months rather than a couple of weeks to push it out. So that's not a financially stable path, I don't think, if it takes me 2 months to make that amount of time to make just a little bit. So I'll turn off sorry about my notifications there.
That's okay.
So
Okay, well,
as far as what I think I have to offer in the position of a mayor and working with the city is being an entrepreneur. I don't give up. I've never given up, and I failed plenty. And that's one of the keys. I see entrepreneurs that are in this chat that have probably worked hard to get where they are and went through the same thing. So I have a solid dedication to always try to make things happen, to adapt the way I do things to make things successful. And you're not always successful. Nobody's ever successful. You don't get success by yourself. You work with a team and you build success. So I'm a very outspoken individual, and I'm not really afraid to give my views on things and to speak up about things. Doesn't always work in my favor, especially with the world of social media and Facebook and all of the chats. People always have something to say, but at the end of the day, I don't shy away from responding and answering to people as well. So even if the narrative is not my narrative, I still try to appreciate other people's opinions and try to get involved, answer the questions the best way that I can, and hope that at the end of the day, a resolve comes that satisfies both parties. So
that's good. And social media is a interesting beast on its own right now. That could be a whole nother hour of chatting. I do have one question in the chat box already. With the hours involved in being a mayor, what would be the plan to balance your private business interests and family life to dedicate the time required? So that is a challenge as entrepreneur, that balancing act. So I'll let you answer. So
I've one thing I've always been very skilled at is balancing all of the things that I have to do. I have severe ADHD, diagnosed when I was a young teenager. So I've always found myself filling my time with as many things as I can, because it's more of an impulse to be successful doing everything. That being said, understanding the role that the mayor takes on and the availability of time that you need to dedicate to the constituents, business interests coming to the city, organizations that want to work with the city, you always have to be able to give them the focus they need. That being said, my personal business, I do have somebody who is going to step in and take that management role there, to take that off of my plate. So for one reason, so I can free up the time that the city requires and that the constituents of the city require. And for another reason, because I don't believe that I should be actively engaged in business in the city if I'm trying to fill that role of a leader in the city. So business has to go on and it needs to continue to operate. And I want to make sure that can be done impartially by somebody who is qualified and dedicated to the business. And I do have a manager in place that's been there almost since the beginning of my most recent is the restaurant that I'm running. And she's capable of doing everything now. And she does do most of the stuff now. I'm shifting my focus over the next few weeks to more so meeting with more people in the community. I have been meeting since I announced my candidacy, but doing a little more focused, directed meeting. I know it's going to take a lot of time, and that's why I kind of wanted to enter the race early. So, as many people who want to talk to me have the ability. Originally, I did commit that I was going to go to every business in the city, but I have gotten feedback, and there are businesses who want to kind of keep the political aspect out of their work. They still want to chat, but having a candidate show up in their place of business during the day is going to be an obstacle. So what I've suggested is a lot of people can reach out to me and we can have that conversation, whether it's sitting down having a coffee at the restaurant or anywhere, have the it's a little harder with restrictions to be able to do that, but at least have the ability to address some of the issues that a lot of business owners in the city currently have, and as well as residents. I do have residents that show up at the restaurant almost on a daily basis, wanting to chat and see what my views are on things and what the direction I want to take on certain topics are. So
great, thank you. Just got, there we go. I mean, there's just some feedback in the background. So what do you feel then? You had talked about teamwork. And so, it sounds like you've got your manager on board and willing to help you with that side of the business. So what do you feel the greatest opportunities and also kind of challenges are for business growth and expansion in Lethbridge?
So the opportunities that I see, something pops up on the, oh, it pops up when somebody says something, I guess. The opportunities are the amount of space in the city to grow is exponential. Like landmass wise, there's lots of room to build more, to grow more, to expand more. And the willingness of entrepreneurs is apparent every day. You see people who are always trying to look into doing new things, who are talking about doing new things. We have an ever-changing demographic in the city where for 20 years it was always trending towards a senior age population, and now we can see in the census the city does every year that we're actually the median age of the city is decreasing. So we're getting younger and younger and younger, and that's your opportunity to grow because you have young families who are choosing to stay here, and willing to get into entrepreneurship and business themselves and want to expand and grow and make things great for their families as well as their communities. So that's the real opportunity here is there's an unknown potential for growth because of the amount of opportunities that exist here, the amount of ideas that people have for what they want to do here. On the flip side of that, because there's always the flip side of the coin, is the obstacles, which is the red tape. There's a lot of red tape in the city as far as permitting and regulations, dealing with even attempting to do something. There's so much vacant space in the city right now that's not allowed to be used because of the red tape that's involved. You've got empty lots that could be serviced as overflow parking in areas of the city, and the city won't allow that to be used. There's entrepreneurs who have been forced to fence off those areas because they can't park cars there because it needs remediation in the ground. And you have a property that had oil and gas and whatever leaking from a service station for 50 years in the city, and now you don't want to park cars there because you're worried about things leaking into the ground. Well, that stuff is already there. And if that property owner doesn't have the $400,000 or $500,000, $600,000 to remediate that property, then we have an eyesore sitting with a chain link fence in the city. Instead of allowing that property owner to say, hey, we'll maintain the property, we'll do the landscaping on it, we'll clean it. Unfortunately, we don't have the money to do that. So there's a lot of red tape involved in the ability for some entrepreneurs to be able to successfully use the property. And you go into bureaucracy where the city says, well, you need to do this, and then we'll satisfy it. But it's always spending money on fees for the city, spending money on rezoning for the city, spending money on all of these things that I don't think are necessary in every circumstance. And it's not saying that everybody should just be able to do whatever they want in the city and that's the way it should be, because that's not practical and it's unrealistic. But you have to look at the long-term effects that something is going to have. And if the use of a property can be maintained without making something worse than it already is, then there has to be some kind of pathway to make that successful without costing somebody $500,000 to be able to use a property that's not worth $500,000. So without getting into specifics on that, on a case by case thing, right? There's
Right.
just a few property owners that I've talked to in the city who said that they'll never be able to sell their property or use it because of the red tape in the city to be able to do that. The other issue we have is we want to talk about economic growth and development and building a bigger, better city. How do you do that when your arteries are clogged? Your arteries to get to different areas of the city aren't practical. I've only been here since 2014, but one of the biggest things I hear from people is for 20 years now, we've had people running for municipal office who dangle the bridge concept in front of people. And they use that as a tool to get elected, and then they never talk about it again. Or they say, oh, well, it's not really financially feasible. And then I look at the next 10-year outlook on capital projects, and we're looking at, let's talk the taxpayer into paying $120,000 for another rec center, but let's not put a third bridge to the west side, which would unclog those arteries. Right now, if a fire happens on the west side and you need backup support, it's 25 minutes to get to the canyons from the south side. And that's if there's no traffic. That's not if there's an artery backlog. The city has done the studies. They've spent taxpayer money to determine whether and where and the appropriate land to be able to put that third passage to the west side, but then they never do anything about it. The city says, oh, it's the liabilities and stuff like that. But then the city wants to be a landlord. The city has an exponential amount of property holdings that are costing taxpayers obscene amounts of money every year. So they have the leverage. The city's assets are in excess of $1.7 billion. So you have the leverage to find the funds to put the bridge to the west side. That's drastically needed for growth and expansion in the city. One for the ability to be able to travel effectively, quickly, without spending 40. You go to Edmonton and Calgary, it's 45 minutes to 2 hours to get from one end of the city to the other. We're a small city, and it should be 10 minutes, 15 minutes max to get from one end of the city to the other. We're not a sprawling area where it should take an unreasonable amount of time. And I'm not saying that a capital project like that should be taken lightly, but the city talks about it like it's something that has to come out of the city coffers tomorrow, and doesn't put the practicality that third bridge to the west side is a 40-year investment, and you have to amortize it over that 40 years and then look at realistic numbers and say, well, this is what it's really going to cost. So, the city and the direction of council, for as far back as I can research, has always been, let's dangle the carrots and then bury them when we finally get into those chairs and council chambers. And I think accountability has to come into play now, that if you're going to make dedications to effective planning and effective projects, and you're going to spend taxpayer money to determine those projects and the costs of those projects and the designs of those projects, that maybe you should actually do the projects that you're spending that money on. So
lots of, yes, that bridge has been a discussion for quite some time. So with that, I have another question in the chat box. So what do you consider the most pressing issue facing the city of Lethbridge?
that's the most unpopular question I can be asked, because it's what I hear almost on a daily basis, which is the mismanagement of funds in the city, the wasteful spending. I've had many people that asked what it would take to do a full audit of the city itself. And I know KPMG did their audit on the assets and the spending and all of that stuff. But, I get people that say that they'll drive down a city street and there's 8 guys working on a site and 3 guys are working and 5 guys are watching them work. And I've seen it myself. I've watched by projects that are happening in the city, and you've got 2 guys that are sitting there leaning against the trucks watching 3 other people work. And I kind of went through some of the income disclosure that's available online. The city of Lethbridge has a HR department that costs in excess of $1 million a year to operate. How does the city require an HR department that you're spending $1 million on? Where is the money going, and why is it going to fund employment that's not effectively being used? I think that it's time to actually sit down and look into what's being spent on where and how it's being spent, and if that spending is effective, because it just boggles my mind. And that's the most alarming part of all of the incomes I looked at, was the fact that we have $1 million HR department and $800,000 plus just on wages, with 5 employees in the HR department that are making over $100,000 a year. Like, I just don't understand. I studied HR when I went to business school. I know people who work in HR, and there's corporations with 5,000 employees that aren't spending $1 million on HR. But the city of Lethbridge somehow found the ability, between their managers and their assistants and their secretaries and the other people working in that department to justify that spending. And I just don't understand it. So my feeling is a full city audit to determine if there's wasteful spending happening in all departments. Look, don't think that I'm sitting here saying that we need to get rid of 20% of the working staff of the city, but how can we effectively use employees who aren't effectively being used, and put people to work in areas like cleanup that need to happen, and doing remediation at the landfill. I've had this discussion a few times. We're burying 25,000 tons of waste a year, and many landfills across the country now have a stop point where they're actually taking in, when people are coming through the gates, those trucks are being routed into a building, and good usable products that are being dumped and buried in the landfill are actually being repurposed, helping low-income families who may need furniture, or are selling the products in thrift stores that are established by organizations, rather than just burying this stuff. Like, there's lots of opportunities for employment that don't involve paying somebody $22 to $33 an hour to hold up a shovel staring in a hole while 5 other people are working. And I get that sometimes you may drive by a site and it may not look like somebody's doing work, but they're just taking a 2-minute break while they're waiting to be directed. But I've driven by sites and seen a guy that on a site not do anything for 3 hours. I've been in a place in the city where I was required to be there for 4 or 5 hours, and seen that one person didn't do anything that entire time. And we need to stop wasteful spending. And that's just where it starts. The other end of that is to start to deal with capital liabilities. And we'll get into a little more of that with one of your other questions that I noticed. But the city of Lethbridge should not be a landlord. Having a real estate portfolio and being a landlord to the city is not part of what the city should be. I agree that the city needs to own capital properties, capital assets, and it should be limited to direct use by the city. So the city owns buildings for operations, and they owns buildings for public works, and they own buildings for obviously the city hall and stuff like that. It has to be a practical use of the city, and not just a property for the sake of being able to lease that property out to another organization who is making profit at that property, and using the coffers of the city to fund maintenance on those properties. If that makes sense. I know that's not worded very well, and I tried to write it down, and I try to look at my notes, but it's hard to condense everything, so we're not getting into a huge debate on those things. But spending in the city has to be adequately monitored, and we really need to start cutting the waste, because the solution is not a small tax increase for everybody in the city every year. That's not a solution. We have some of the highest taxes in the province, and when it turns out that it costs more to live here than it does in Edmonton and Calgary, then you really have to ask yourself, how are those big metropolises operating without overtaxing their citizens? And a steady tax increase here every year is not an option. What is an option is putting in a third bridge, growing this city, inviting manufacturers and tech companies and everybody else to come and say we're open for business here, and getting more taxes for more people. Now, that I'm not saying get higher taxes for more people. I'm saying getting more taxes for more people. The taxes here are they're ridiculous. Let's be honest. And we're being taxed more and more every year, but not getting more and more. So really looking at ways to curb the spending, cutting out the wasteful spending, and adjusting the budget so that we're not overspending on liabilities that are continually losing money every year. And like I said, we'll get into that with another question. But the NMAX, for example, the city owns the NMAX, and that's $1 million money pit every year. So
one question I would have then, because you referred to the KPMG report, and I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to really like review some of the sectors of it. But is there a different city? Because in the KPMG report, it referred to other cities because we're considered a mid-sized type of city. Have you looked at any other cities, and is there any models that you would compare or that you think are good, or what would you reach on to then help enhance different things in our city that you feel really stand out as positive in at other cities?
I'm still going through. The report is exponential, and then there's more than one. There's the first part of that report, and there's a second part of the report. So I've been going back and forth and trying to do as much as I can with the free time that I have. But spending per capita based on cities that have larger population bases, Lethbridge is really high. Like you look at cities that have 130 to 250,000 people, and they're not spending as much per person as we are. You know, there's, I don't know how you say it without, everybody gets offended for everything. This city and this council for 40 years have pushed the narrative that this is a vibrant retirement community. But then they're spending all this money on a census every year that's telling us a different story. You know, when your city is getting younger, it tells you that maybe this isn't a vibrant retirement community. That's not to say that we can't have great programs and services for the aging population, but you're forgetting the younger population who is choosing to come here. And you know, you have to really adapt your spending to cater to what your population is. And right now, if we're spending all we can on services that are underutilized, we're lacking in other areas that could see those funds. So, you know, I'm not going to not answer your question as far as the KPMG and comparing us to other cities, because I don't think that what that report shows and reflects is a fair comparison to what other cities are, because right now we're classified as a vibrant retirement community. And I think that if that report was done based on the belief that we're going to be a progressive, youthful place for families to come and grow their families and grow their businesses, then that report would tell a different tale. So it's like me saying that apples are the greatest things in the world, but these oranges over here are good. But you know, we're really focused on apples and not the context of what the oranges are. So hey Bruce, thanks for tuning in, and have a great day. So the report, I get, cost tons of money, and it was guided by the direction of the city managers and the city council and other parties who had vested interests in seeing what they wanted in that report. But the report, although a lot of the numbers are factual as far as what certain properties are costing and the high liabilities that some of those things entail, when you're planning to turn Lethbridge from what it is now to a population of, say, 150,000 people by 2050, your ball is in the wrong court. There's absolutely no reason why this city couldn't be 150,000 people in 10 years. With the right planning, freeing up the arteries, making transportation and travel in the city effective, so that if somebody is choosing to build in a brand new plot far on the west side, that they're able to work on the south side without having to spend an hour to get to work. You know, everybody, it's apparent. You're looking, you know, the east side of the city is now growing. The west side of the city continues to grow. The north side of the city continues to grow. But as we build more houses and invite more people to live here, how do they travel? On roads that are already, you know, they're crowded already. You can't add more traffic to an already strained transportation system, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely.
Right now, one of the things that is the hottest topic I hear every day is that ridiculous parking terminal that they put downtown, you know, in excess of $30 million, when studies have shown here that people aren't using transit. Buses are empty. The only buses that are full are the ones going to and from the university. In general, buses are empty. If I see a bus with 10 people on it, I'm astonished. And here in the last 4 or 5 years, we've spent in excess of what, $50 million on public transportation in a city that's already made it apparent that they prefer to drive themselves. So why is the money being put there? The things aren't changing. Brand new, beautiful parking terminal downstairs or downtown. And how much more revenue has that generated from the city since it's been done? Or is that just another addition to the city's rental portfolio where they can rent to the Red Arrow and they can rent to other tenants who want to be in that building? There's tons of buildings that the city owns right now that could have been retrofitted if they wanted to make more office space, if they're so adamant in keeping those commercial liabilities going. But spend.
Oh, sorry. And that kind of leads in, because we might as well just jump into kind of like you talked about NMAX a little bit. Do you believe the city should compete with private industry? Because you're kind of referring to that right now with, talking about office space and things like that. So let you can finish your thoughts on that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This city is here to attract business, to attract entrepreneurs, to attract families, to attract people to grow the city. The city should not be a landlord. The city should not own sports teams. The city should not own properties that they control a monopoly because they own the electricity, they own the water, they own the sewer, they own the concessions, they own the parking lot. If you go to exhibition grounds right now for a big event, our tax dollars are funding that place. Exhibition Park makes a lot of income off of events that are happening there. And I get, now we have a year and a half that they're really struggling because the events aren't happening, the funds aren't coming in, and taxpayers are bailing it out. But then if I'm going to whoop up days, I'm spending money to get in there. I'm spending money to park in a parking lot that our tax dollars are maintaining on a property that belongs to the city. The city likes to talk and try to convince taxpayers to fund retrofits on buildings for this organization. And I'm straining myself from identifying organizations because I don't want to alienate those people who are involved in those organizations. But if you have an organization that is utilizing a building that belongs to the city of Lethbridge, why are we lobbying for them to convince taxpayers to spend more money on that building when that organization is earning income in that building? They're earning income through events, they're earning income through fundraising, but you want our tax dollars to retrofit their building. So how about this? And here's a concept. Why don't we give them the building? Because honestly, giving them a building worth $1 million or $1.2 million is going to be a lot cheaper than the liabilities that the building incurs for the next 10 years. So yes, we're going to lose assets. We're going to lose that $1.7 billion of flashy paperwork that shows that the city owns all of these things. But we're also going to eliminate the liabilities that come with them. If you have NMAX that's costing $1 to $2 million a year out of the taxpayer's pocket because the city wants to own the Hurricanes and they want to own the building that the Hurricanes are in, it's not affordable to do anything at the NMAX. That's why it's losing money. How do you own the building and you set the price and then you complain and use tax dollars to bail it out because you can't utilize the property to its full potential? It's the same with Galt Gardens. I hear the constant thing, well, did you know that in Galt Gardens you have to be a nonprofit or a not-for-profit to even utilize the gardens? I can't decide that I want to throw an event down there and have a big event in Galt Gardens. The city will say, oh yeah, you can do it, you just have to go through all the approval process. But guess what? They deny. Unless it's in the special interest of the city, they deny. You can't own a property that the taxpayers are paying and then deny them because you don't like what they're doing. The city needs to be impartial completely. Special interests shouldn't be driving the city. The special interests shouldn't decide what happens with city properties. I get that there's operating costs. You need to make money, you need to earn things. But when you're running a monopoly on something and you set the price and you're still using taxpayer dollars to bail it out because it's underutilized, then you have a serious problem. It's bad business. And I don't claim to be a business guru or the most successful business person in the world, and I make mistakes all the time. but the city has to be more accountable to the dollars they're spending on things. And the city shouldn't be a landlord. It shouldn't be a property owner. It shouldn't be owning sports teams. All of those things are private enterprise, and they conflict with the ability for private enterprise to come in and do anything. Do you know that I had somebody come into the restaurant about 2 months ago and tell me about an organization that wanted to put like a smaller type of stage in a building in the city. And it didn't matter what they did, the city denied it because it competes with the city's theaters that are next to City Hall. So how are you limiting the ability for somebody to want to open their own playhouse so they can do, you know, their own small productions and things like that? No, we have a facility like that. So you just need to rent our facility to be able to do it. And then in the capital spending for the next 10 years, they want to spend in excess of $100 million to build another theater in the city. There's organizations and companies and businesses that should be able to do that. It's private, they're private enterprise.
So do you think
Stop
that's,
competing against the people.
so do you think that's another example of a red tape issue then? You know, some of those hurdles that
Absolutely.
business is going through or expressing to you that they're facing. So do you think maybe that
Absolutely.
that the red tape, so like, is that an like an overhaul on bylaws, or like how do you see fixing some of those red tape issues then?
So how do you give oversight to an organization that has the absolute oversight over the city? The problem is the city doesn't allow anybody to critique what they're doing. It doesn't matter if you go see a counselor and you go with a petition and you want to have something done. Guess what? 9 people in a round room in the city make all the decisions, regardless of what people want. It's what jives with their agenda and what they think that should happen. I'm going to tell you something, and personal experience 2 months ago, I went through this. And let's talk about red tape and the city overcharging fees to contractors and businesses. So in my restaurant, for example, I have a used car dealer license. So from time to time I sell used cars, and I have an AMBIC license and do all that. So I wanted to be able to utilize an office that I have upstairs in my restaurant to sell cars out of my parking lot. So I went to the city. At first they said, oh, it's not possible to do. Then they said, but if you pay us $420, we will do, we'll try to do a variation of your parking. So, but I was already given information telling me that the parking was available in my parking lot for the space that I wanted to use as that AMBIC license. So they were trying to force me to pay $420 for something that should have cost $60. And me not being the type that'll lay down and just take it, I escalated it, only to find out that the parking variation that they wanted me to do and pay the $420 for was already done 10 years ago. And they were trying to charge me $340 more for something they already charged to be done. That was already an approved use of the parking lot and the development in that parcel of land. How often is that happening? How often are city employees overcharging businesses, contractors, homeowners for things that have already been approved or already meet the requirements? And it's not the first time. There's multiple times in the last couple of years I've attempted to utilize properties to do something that property was previously utilized for that purpose, only be told, no, it's $420, and if you don't pay that, you can't do it. So it's just constant. It's
Well,
like,
I wonder if
there's somebody. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm wondering then if there's a way to have a better reporting system or a better, you know, data analysis, so you could look up that property and see what that property has previously been approved for. Just so you know, okay, it's been approved for this, this, and this, because some property has a very long history in Lethbridge. So maybe that's something as part of this red tape is how do we help investors and business look through the history to help eliminate like time barriers and cost barriers.
Well, the city doesn't want you to see those things, and the city, you know, it's astonishing that just in the last year, finally, miraculously, you can now pay your city bills online. You don't have to go down to the building and go through that whole process or pay through your bank, right? Like, the city needs to understand we're in the well into the 21st century where the digital age is taking over. You know, there's ways to track all of those things. If I'm standing at the counter at development services, and they're saying, well, I can't see back that far. And we're not talking generations, we're talking in the last 10 years. You know, they can't see back that far. So maybe it's time, with all this money you're wasting on people who are holding up shovels in the city and enjoying the nice weather, maybe re-educate and repurpose those people into departments where they can actually take all of the archives and make them digital and put them in an inventory system where this property, this is all the records since incorporation. We have them. All we need to do, everything is digital. Every province, every city, every organization takes everything digital now. So the city needs to understand that, yeah, we understand you're catering, and it's older people and they don't like technology, but guess what? You're paying, your tax dollars are paying for a census that are saying we're not an aging population anymore. We're decreasing in age population. And you need to deal with that and make sure that you're making everything accessible for everybody.
So I'm going to kind of spin the table a little bit and go to the what do you think the highlights of the city are? So if you're promoting Lethbridge to other areas, like what do you see as those real strong highlights that makes our city grow, or that will, like, what are the highlights? What are your highlights of our city?
So Lethbridge is a youthful, educated population. We have two major post-secondary education facilities in the school, which sees the students leaving and going elsewhere. Why can't we cater to them to convince them to stay, to make opportunities for them to stay? The educated youth are here. The people who are going to grow this city into future generations, they're already here. But we need to work on a plan to keep them here. We have a beautiful city. Don't get me wrong. I necessarily don't agree with all of the money we spend watering grass when there's more effective ways to grow grass that don't cost, all of the water that they use. But the city has done well as far as creating recreation spaces. They like to put parks everywhere. I don't think I've ever been anywhere where there's so many parks. So the ability to grow here is exponential. We're very closely positioned to the United States for travel for both business, because I know there's a lot of potential for cross-border business. So companies to come here that can do manufacturing, that can do development, more agriculture and stuff to do trading with the US. That's an asset that the city has, because it's a very well-established position city. We have an airport that's underutilized, more so because there's no focus put into the city. The city had this big announcement that they were taking over the airport from the county, but then they never did anything with it. Everybody says, oh, well, we should have a Red Lobster here. Well, we can't have a Red Lobster because we're not an international airport. But why aren't we? Why can't we be? We have a population of 100,000 people. That population is only going to grow. And if you cater to those issues that we currently don't meet and build to them, then we can be much more than what we are now. We have the space, we have the people, we have the business-minded entrepreneurs who want to grow here, who want to see things progress. They're having children, their families are here. I know people from back east that would love to come here. The problem is what do they do when they get here? It can't be a strain on the system, right? Unless we can grow and develop and create more opportunities. We have a city that's well poised to do that. We have the landmass for growth. We have the people who are passionate about Lethbridge. That's one thing that I see is in any issue in this city, the passion is unfounded. People have no problem telling what they want to do and how they want to do it, but their council is failing them. You have to ask yourself why a city like this can't even get 25,000 people out to vote. That's a real problem in itself, right?
And hopefully this next, and that's one of the reasons we want to do these early rounds and introduce people to, encourage more people to get out and vote and, have some of the conversations like what we're having today. And it's interesting. My next question was going to be, and it's in the chat box. So great minds think alike there, Jen. What would your ideas be for economic development and promotion for the city, as well as what would your strategy be for economic recovery as we come out of the pandemic?
Sorry, I got a chat bubble that popped up the exact same time. Can you repeat that?
That's okay.
I
Sure, of
apologize.
course. No, absolutely. What would your idea be for economic development and promotion for the city, as well as what would your strategy be for economic recovery as we come out of the pandemic?
So as far as the economic development side of things go, and I know you had a question that was kind of wrapped around that a little bit, with the city and deciding to do their own path forward to promote tourism and stuff in the city. Again, the city wants to have their hands in everything. When you already have organizations here that are capable and ready and willing to help build this city and help promote this city and help bring in both tourists and businesses and stuff like that, that's the point of an economic development authority, right? That's why they're here. And I believe giving them the power and the oversight to be able to move forward in an effective way to help grow the city, to help grow tourism, to help bring in the things that the city are lacking are important. We want to talk about how we're going to get out of this economic recovery, or get through this economic recovery. And right now the bar is non-existent because the city's not doing anything. I know people that have businesses who have been harassed to pay their $193 business license fee when they haven't been able to operate since last March. All the city cares about is the money they're putting in their pocket and how they can get any fee out of any person through any means. So let's make reference to something that they put forward a couple of weeks ago, which was this 50% matching up to $1,000 for patios for restaurants because you can't have dine-in service. But you got to pay $60 fee just to apply. Okay. So you're going to the city and you're paying $60 fee, and then we'll match what you're going to spend up to $1,000. There's restaurants that are struggling that can't even afford to barely keep their doors open. And now you're saying, we'll give you $1,000 if you spend $1,000. But where does that $1,000 come from? I just don't understand this city who likes to portray that they're all about small business and helping small business, and making it look like a shining rose on paper, and then doing nothing, or overfeeing or overtaxing or creating so much red tape that it's impossible. So you can put a patio in your parking lot, but it has to look exactly like we think it should. And if we don't like the way that you've designed it, then you can't do it. You have to adjust it. And if you don't have enough parking stalls, then we need you to pay $420 to get a parking exemption to be able to utilize that space so that there's both enough parking and, do you know what I mean? Like it's just constantly, the city is, oh yeah, we're all for small business and we're all for coming out of this and this recovery and doing things to help, but they're not doing anything to help. They're just making it seem like they're doing things and just deterring people from even applying. Like there would be no point in me paying the $60 fee to go and do a patio when I don't have $1,000 to spend on a patio.
Right.
So waive the fee. It's $60. You're trying to help your small businesses, not close them. And that patio, well, now that doesn't matter because we're in a new set of restrictions where you can't even use your patios. So thankfully, maybe it was a good thing that some people couldn't afford to pay that fee and get into it, because then they didn't spend all that money on a patio that they can't use. But
so let's talk about those the new restrictions. Not that we're talk about the restrictions, but so as the mayor, then how would you communicate to the provincial government and then to represent Lethbridge, and then even that federal level, because there's those strong ties between municipal government and provincial government. So how would you, this is an issue. How would you approach the provincial and federal government on some of these things?
It's a loaded question, right? Because there's no right answer as far as what anybody's thoughts are on the restrictions and how things should be and how things shouldn't be. the restrictions, in my personal opinion, and I'll get backlash for it. I know I'll get people that'll message me at the restaurant and tackle me on Facebook, but the restrictions aren't effective. No level of restrictions are effective. And this is why countries and states have moved away from them. Because right now, the only thing they're accomplishing with the restrictions is sending people into backyards for barbecues and fires and social gatherings where they're not following the rules, because people have had enough. If they wanted to tackle this, they should have did it properly in the beginning.
So
But then how do you control another wave? How do you control another wave from happening? Because it's going to keep happening. You know, you look at the country of shales right now, who has a population that's vaccinated over 90%, and guess what? They have an outbreak. 90% vaccinated population, and now they're having to shut down things again because they have another outbreak. So, well, let's push the vaccines and let's lock everything down to just continue in this rolling cycle that's not going to stop. The flu doesn't stop. The flu hasn't stopped for decades, because guess what? It's always going to come back. If you look at what the flu is, it's a different form of coronavirus. Coronavirus, people look at the media and COVID-19, coronaviruses, oh, they're terrible things. There's hundreds of coronaviruses. If you look at the back of your Lysol spray container before COVID, it said effective for coronaviruses right on the instructions on the back of the bottle. Coronaviruses aren't a new thing. They just didn't come out of the woodwork. They've been around for generations. So how about looking at a plan to make things work where you're not killing your economy, and tackling and protecting the people who are vulnerable?
So what does that plan look like then? And how would you, as the mayor of Lethbridge, communicate that out?
I personally think that people should have the right to choose for themselves. You know, everybody says that, oh, you need to stay in, you need to stay in, you need to stay in. The evidence is showing that staying in does not work. It's not stopping it. The personal choices of people are stopping it. We can't take people's rights away. You can't force people to do things that they don't want to do just because you think that it's a good idea and it's going to work. And again, it's a hot button topic, and I know I'll get the backlash from it, but everybody deserves the right to decide for themselves. And you know what? If you're in that vulnerable sector, you have the right to decide to stay home. You know, you can get everything delivered to your house, because right now, the people that are 100% adamant that this is the way that it needs to be and everybody needs to be locked up and everything needs to be locked down, can take advantage of those things. They can take advantage of the home deliveries. They can take advantage of staying home. If you want to stay home and you think everybody should stay home, everybody's entitled to their opinion, so you stay home. And every person that wants to stay home can stay home. You have Texas right now and Florida, who have vaccination rates less than we do, that aren't seeing a surge in cases. They're not seeing a surge in outbreaks because herd immunity is working. It's proven to work overseas. They're seeing it's working in places. I find, and I watch all the feeds and I'm watching all the newscasts from everywhere, people are having more problems with vaccinations than they are with case counts. The more it seems that people are getting vaccinated, the higher cases seem to be going. They're not going down. And I challenge anybody to come to the restaurant and print off the evidence that shows me that as vaccination rates go up, the cases are going down, because they're not. And they won't. You can't stop the flu. The flu happens every year, except for this year that we have no flu. Dr. Hinshaw says we have no flu. The flu miraculously disappeared for no reason. I mean, use common sense, man. Think about it.
So then how, as the mayor, how would you encourage, how do you encourage business owners to keep going and working through this and finding their way and finding the groove in this new reality? You know, and it doesn't matter on what side of the fence that you sit on, because like you said, everyone's has their own opinion on this topic. but we still want stability in our city. So how do you work with, how do you create balance within this era?
So as a city, we need to table our share of this pandemic. Right now, the city is not absorbing the losses that everybody else is absorbing. The city is still getting their full utilities. They're still getting their full taxes. They're still getting their full service fees. The city is getting everything. And if they're not getting it right now, they're putting service fees on for late payments. The city isn't taking the loss, and we need to. As a city and as mayor, hopefully with like-minded councilors who understand that the city needs to take their responsibility as well, because the city can't keep profiting while everybody else is losing and going bankrupt. The city has to look at, okay, you know, we have to take a loss on the property tax this year. It's just, that's what it has to be. You have businesses, and my business alone, my share of the property tax in my building is $1,400 a year. That's not a lot of money, but guess what? Every little bit counts. So that being said, the city has to put things in place to say, okay, we're going to waive the property tax for that business who has been affected by the pandemic, that has lost that reduction because of all of the rules, and ensure that that business benefits. So I don't own my building. So it would be a matter of the city putting out a notice to that taxpayer that owns that building and saying, listen, we're going to cut the taxes on this building this year. You have to directly pass that on and stop charging those taxes to your tenant for this year. Things like that. You know what? Why are we paying the $193 for a business license when we're not operating to our full capacity? Because we're not allowed. The city needs to take their share of that cost. The city can't just expect that nobody else is making the money, but the city has to make all of the money. It doesn't work that way. The city has to take the responsibility and say, it's a pandemic. Everybody needs to take a loss. As a city, we need to take a loss.
So then how would you manage the city operating off a loss then?
The city operates off a loss consistently. Maybe not deficits to the point that we're looking the province is doing, but we have NMAX that loses in excess of $1 million a year. That's a loss. So why does the city continue to operate that if they're losing money on it? Why don't they just sell it to somebody and let somebody else lose money on it or make the full potential? You have to look at it, everything in the city under the same microscope. If you can justify taking a loss on your capital assets in the city, then you can justify taking a loss because of COVID, because you have businesses that are struggling or going bankrupt because you're expecting them to take all the losses and hope that they can just accumulate so much debt to sail through, or maybe another level of government will help them. And I can tell you, any business that opened in 2020 for the first few months isn't getting helped by the other government. We never got employee wage subsidies. We never got rent subsidies, nothing, because we opened in January. And there's lots of other businesses that face that. So we're having to pay all of our bills while the government picks and chooses who they should help. You know who gets helped? Big box stores, corporations, big business that's paying lots of money in taxes to be here, because, you know, they'll always be here. The little guy they may fail anyway. They may last 2-3 years. I've had people come into my business and tell me, you just close. Business restaurants don't last 2 years. You know, restaurants usually close 2 to 3 years after they open, unless they're really successful. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to operate my restaurant until my key doesn't work in the door. If my key doesn't work in the door, guess what? Then I'm done. Because I have 11 people who work for me who rely on that money to pay their rent, pay their bills. So whatever I need to do to make sure that they're able to continue doing that, that's what I'm going to do. The city needs to understand that they need to work with businesses and help businesses, not pretend they're going to help, not match dollar for dollar matching programs on a business that can't afford to partake in that program because that money doesn't exist. So the city's okay with and let's just use a round number that 400 restaurants in the city take advantage of that patio promotion they did and spend $500,000 of their own money to build patios, and the city's willing to pay $500,000 only after those struggling businesses pay the $500,000. Don't give ultimatums to programs. we thank you for being part of our city. We thank you for being a business who's trying to improve and build the economy in the city. So now we're going to take a cut to help you to make sure that you survive. And the city needs to take that approach, and they're not doing that. And that would be my path going forward, is to work with the businesses to make sure that they're still here in 5 years. Because you know what? If we lose 40% of the small businesses in this city, if this pandemic rages on for another year, that's what's going to happen. And unless the city steps up and does something to make sure that those small businesses aren't closing, they're dead in the water now. Sorry, I shouldn't say dead, because I got in trouble for that on the radio. Well, the radio got in trouble with my radio ad because we were insensitive because of the whole COVID and people dying and stuff like that. So again, sometimes I don't say the best things, but it's, the city has to step up and do something to better the city, and not just the city's pocketbooks.
Well, and it's very clear that you have a strong passion for business in the city, and how you just said, work with business to help business, and that is obviously one of the things that, as the Chamber of Commerce, that we are really striving to work hard with business. So we're at 10:32. See, that hour just kind of flew by. So if you wanted to kind of give a closing statement, and then I'll thank you everybody for attending and staying on, because I did see a couple people that had to leave. I know probably had back-to-back meetings, but what would you like to say as a closing statement, Bradley?
I think that this election is a pinnacle pivot point for the direction of where the city needs to go. And I think that I don't think that any candidate that has put their name forward is any better than any candidate. I haven't met Stephen. I hope to be able to sit down and have a chat with him and have some coffee. But at the end of the day, people say, "Oh, what are you going to do when it comes to debates and stuff like that?" It's not about debates. If people are going to fight about what they believe to do this job, then they're not fighting for the people in the city. What we need to do collectively, all of us that are running, and hopefully more people decide to start putting their name forward now than rather wait until August, because that's my concern, is how interested are you in benefiting the city and the progress of the city if you can't even put your name forward now? You either know you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. So stop waiting. Allow people to see who they have to choose from, what benefits they can get from the candidates who have the ideas to push this city forward in the right direction, and get on board. Take this serious. We have a serious problem when we can't get 25,000 people in this city to vote. 22,000 people out of 76,000 eligible voters in the last election. And I believe with the new numbers, we're somewhere around close to 90,000 eligible voters this time. Let's get 50,000 people out to vote. If you want change in the city and you want the city to be better, everybody needs to do their part. You can't complain about not having a say when our council consists of less than 30% of the majority of the city. That's not a majority. We have people making decisions based on a small percentage of people in this community, and we really need to work to figure out a way to get more people out, to encourage people to get out, and to say, hey, listen, this time things will change, things will be better. I have friends that are on council that I've chatted with people, and I like people that are on council, but you really need to start asking yourself, if somebody's been on the ballot for 25 years, are they really effective to help the progress and the future of the city? Nothing changes without change. You can't make the city better unless you change the narrative. And right now, if we continue to refresh the narrative every 4 years with the same people sitting in the seats that have been there, we're not effectively changing anything. We're just recycling what we already have. And I think this time is the time to make that change. I originally said that if somebody was on the ballot that if somebody was on the ballot last time, maybe they shouldn't be on the ballot this time. But that's not a fair point of view to have, because there are people on council who wish to see the progress, wish to see the change, and wish to grow business. And everybody deserves a fair chance to be able to do that. So we really need to sit down and do more than just show up on election day and check a box. You really need to look into all of these candidates and what they have to offer, what their future looks like, and what they believe the future of the city looks like. We can continue on the 40-year track that we've had of building a great retirement community, but people have to understand, if we keep on that track, you're asking for higher taxes. You're asking for higher taxes year after year after year, because of all you're inviting to be here is an aging population. They're not paying, they're not building businesses, they're not building organizations, they're not bringing more people into the city, they're just retiring, which is okay. I'm okay with retirement and having areas in the city that are thriving for retirement and having golf courses for them to use and seniors activities to use. But we either want to be a retirement community, or we want to grow and develop as a vibrant city that can be, contrary to what the city thinks of 150,000 people by 2050, being 300,000 people by 2050. And we have the potential, we have the land mass, we have the opportunities here. We're poised with our own airport close to an international border that can see a lot of things happen here. So working together, and I hope to work with some of the other candidates. At the end of the day, even in a debate, I don't think that I'm any better than Steven, or Steven's any better than me or Blaine, because I get people every day that are showing up in my business say, Blaine's running for mayor. I said, well, until he puts his name in, but we all know, everybody knows that he's going to run for mayor. Don't wait anymore. Just come forward, put your name on the ballot. Let's let everybody see all of the options they have, instead of putting somebody in the first week of September, the middle of September, who's all of a sudden going to be on the ballot less than a month later and not give anybody any time to think. Let's get all the ideas out there and really work to see what the best options are for the city. And I encourage collaboration with any candidate that wants to sit down and have a chat with me. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's not about that job. I already got a job. I already have a business. I'm already working. But you know what? If I can put myself forward and dedicate my time to making the city a better place for my 5 children that are here, then I want an opportunity to do that as well. It's not about the job and about the paycheck and about the status. Oh, I'm the mayor of this city. No, it's about working and making sure that every person in this city has a voice. Anybody who knows me, I'm telling you, if you look at the roasted toasts and search my name, you're going to find people that always talk about me, because I'm not afraid to say anything. I'm not afraid to speak up. It may not be part of the narrative that people want to hear, but I'll say the things that people don't want to hear. I'll bring up the topics that people are too afraid to bring up, because everybody in the city should have a voice. I hope that I have the opportunity to work with as many people as possible. I hope that this city can finally clamp down and create a ward system, so that every councillor is actually accountable to a community and not just drawing, 400 to 500 votes out of the 8 sections of the city that are getting them in those seats. Because right now there's no accountability. And let's work together to build a better city, to make everybody in the city accountable, and to thrive, because that's what this city can be.
Well, thank you for that. And and it is nice. Thank you so much again for hanging out with us this morning and having such a good open conversation. I think that's fantastic. We do have Sheldon J. Chief we're going to be having one of these candidate forums with him on May 18th. So hopefully now more and more people will start coming out of the woodwork and putting their name forward, as you said. But today we got to talk with you and get your views, and there's I learned a lot about you today, things that I didn't know, and I like how you're talking about youthful population and their potential moving forward. So thank you for highlighting some of the different things that and different perspectives. That's what we need, like you said, collaboration among different perspectives. That is what will help our city grow.
Oh, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the opportunity. So
of course, no, thank you. And we'll be doing these, and we'll be doing this till election day. So there'll be many more opportunities to speak, and I look forward to that. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and weekend. And to all the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.